How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pate. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. Everyone is telling her she dreamt it, but in The Woman in Cabin 10, Lo Blacklock is determined to uncover the truth. In the gripping new thriller coming to Netflix October 10th, Keira Knightley plays a journalist aboard a luxury yacht who witnesses a crime she can't unsee. Adapted from Ruth Ware's best-selling novel, directed by Simon Stone. Watch The Woman in Cabin 10, only on Netflix on October 10th.
Tito's Handmade Vodka is America's favorite vodka for a reason. From the first legal distillery in Texas, Tito's is 6 times distilled till it's just right. And naturally gluten-free, making it a high-quality spirit that mixes with just about anything. From the smoothest martinis to the best Bloody Marys. Tito's is known for giving back, teaming up with nonprofits to serve its communities and do good for dogs. Make your next cocktail with Tito's. Distilled and bottled by 5th Generation Inc., Austin, Texas. 40% alcohol by volume. Savor responsibly.
Do you want diverse horror with teeth? Speculative fiction that cuts deep? This is it. Blood Clot Zine is Canada's first BIPOC horror and speculative fiction zine. Forget the stories you know. These are the nightmares they tried to bury, the futures they couldn't imagine. Own a piece of the revolution October 7th. All proceeds go to Doctors Without Borders. You can find more info on bloodclotzine.com and Blood Clot Zine on Instagram and Threads. Blood Clot Zine, stories that bleed. Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell you scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse wherever you stream podcasts. Just be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. And now you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon, where even by joining for free, you can receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. And be sure to follow the Red Treehouse on social media at Red Treehouse Pod. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. With over 200 episodes under my belt, there's a big part of me that likes to think my best days are still ahead of me. It may sound like I'm exaggerating, but I learned something new about storytelling with every episode. And a major part of learning, at least for me, is to listen to other storytellers. One of my absolute favorites is Chillers and Thrillers, hosted by M. If that name sounds familiar, it's because we did a story swap way back in episode 145. Where I narrated a handful of genuinely scary Ouija board experiences. And today, we're doing another story swap, and I have the privilege of narrating a handful of M's favorite stories. If you've never listened to Chillers and Thrillers, I can't recommend it enough. M's narration style, combined with the soft crackle of a campfire, is both eerie and soothing. You can follow the show wherever you stream pods. Be sure to pass the word along and leave a 5-star review. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore a collection of listener stories submitted by M. What scary experiences do you have? And would you consider them to be natural or supernatural? Normal or paranormal? I'll share the stories. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Our first story is entitled Connie and was written by Louisa Maybe 12. When I was a teenager, my grandfather, my mom's dad, started suffering from dementia and came to live at our house for a few years. It was a nice time being with him, but it was also sad watching him decline. The dementia went mostly as expected: strangely misplaced items, general confusion. But there was one really weird thing that my grandfather did that really disturbed me and my mom. One day, he started talking about Connie. "Where did she go?" he asked. We thought he was talking about my deceased grandmother, but her name was Anne. No one in our family was named Connie, so we figured he was just confused. But he kept asking about Connie. I started wondering if Connie was some woman that had been in his life that none of us had known about. The weird stuff started happening shortly after. He would randomly have his shoes already tied by seemingly no one. He had long ago lost the motor skills to do it himself, and when asked, he would of course name Connie. One day, he casually explained there would be a storm coming, and shortly after, one would come. Again, he said Connie told him. There were lots of little things like this: furniture and doors moving around, mysterious footsteps at night, and always, he would say it was Connie. My mom and I started to think of Connie as a sort of kind ghost or angel looking after him in his old age. Until one day, he was talking about Connie, and he grabbed my hand suddenly and looked at me with his eyes wide and his lip trembling. He looked terrified. "Where's Connie?" he asked as usual. "She's not here," I said, my usual answer. "Quick, shut the door. Don't let her find me. Quick, before she gets me again." A creepy feeling came over me. "Who is Connie?" I asked for the millionth time. But he just put his hands over his face and started to rock back and forth, moaning. After that, we heard less about Connie, but mostly because we were too creeped out to keep asking about the weird noises and the random things he seemed to know. However, one night I woke up to the sound of footsteps and scratching. The footsteps were fast, like someone was running around the house. I hesitated to leave my room, scared of what I would find. I saw a figure down the hall, turning around the corner, and I almost stopped there and shut my bedroom door when I heard my grandfather's moaning and realized the figure was him. "Grandpa," I asked as I went over to him. He was scratching frantically at something. "What is it?" I touched him on the shoulder and he turned around startled. On the table was a ripped out page from a magazine ad of a woman, and he had scribbled in pen all over her eyes. "Connie's eyes," he said. "Her eyes are missing. She's horrible. Why won't she leave me alone?" My mother and I had no real way of comforting my grandfather through these nightmares and terrors he was experiencing. The doctors said it was normal for him at this stage, and we all sensed that he had little time left. When he died a few months later in the hospital, the nurses told us that he called out Connie's name in his worst times. My mother and I don't really talk about it anymore, and we just figure that it was all a symptom of his dementia. But sometimes, when I hear weird sounds in the middle of the night, I think that maybe Connie is still with me, waiting to torment me with big gaping holes where her eyes should be. Our second story is entitled The Stickman and was written by Existential Ninja 40. I am from St. Cloud, and I've had more than a few experiences growing up. I now live in the Twin Cities, but my pop still lives in St. Joseph, which is a few miles out of St. Cloud and very rural. I saw a stickman when driving out to swim at Middle Skunk Lake in Avon, about 10 miles from St. Cloud. Me and my family would go out there multiple times a week during the summer to go swimming at the beach. One night, we were driving back on the back roads through the country right by St. John's University, which has a whole bunch of creepy history on its own. There were only random farms situated amongst the rolling fields and woods in the area. There is a long stretch where there were cornfields on both sides of the road, but the right side was a small area of corn that ran directly up the woods, probably 100 to 150 yards from the road. I remember always having a nervous, anxious feeling when driving this stretch due to the woods, not to mention that this area just had a strange vibe to it. One night, while driving back, I had my head rested against the window in the back of the minivan and happened to see movement at the edge of the cornfield and woods to my right. I broke from my daze and looked closer, and up ahead at the tree line/cornfield border was a man standing next to the tree, just like a statue almost. I still remember the absolute terror I felt when I saw this, and we were going to be parallel with him/it in a matter of seconds. I remember that I wondered how I could see him since the corn was rather high, probably beginning to middle of August, and I could see almost from his waist up. He was so tall and skinny and looked almost like he was composed of sticks. But I also remember he had on a red-colored flannel shirt that was tattered and torn up, and what looked like a hood. But the scariest thing was that I saw him moving for a second, and then he froze as if he knew I was seeing him, and he just stood there staring straight ahead. When we were almost parallel to him, I heard a voice in my head say, "Look at me." And as we became parallel to him, he had this smile on his face, and it was all distorted in a sense. But I remember how big and sinister the smile was, and how time felt like it was slowed down or almost moving at a pace like strobe lights flashing, with each scene moving like an on-off switch from darkness then light, and seeing things when it was light again. It is very hard to explain the feeling of terror I was experiencing, and still can feel when recalling this. I was so scared and discombobulated that I remember wanting to scream or say something, but not being able to do so. I also remember that it was as if everyone else in the van were almost on autopilot because no one even saw or glanced over, not my 3 siblings or mom and dad. They were all just looking forward in their own worlds. I remember that there was a heaviness in the van, which I don't know how to explain, but it felt like it was both a static electric feeling and thickness in the air. But it was after driving around a bend that the feeling dissipated, and suddenly I was able to hear the radio and my siblings talking. I yelled, "Did anyone else see that man in the woods?" And my mom said, "What man in the woods?" To which I tried to explain to them what I saw, but none of them believed me. To this day, I still vividly remember that night and the feeling. And I even took some friends down that road last summer when I was back there visiting my dad. I instantly started getting that same feeling I would get as a child when we turned onto the road. There was alfalfa growing then, so I could see right back to the tree line. I saw the area that I saw the stick man, and it made me realize how high up he was. So he was either standing on something, or floating, or just that fucking tall. Nothing happened last time when I went back, but the feeling remained the same, and I would never want to be stuck driving that road by myself, whether it was day or night, because I have no desire to see that man/thing again. I should mention that the time I saw it initially was around dusk, and when me and my friends went back last summer, it was probably late afternoon or early evening. But it still creeped me out, just like it always had all those years ago. Our next story is entitled The Crone and was written by King Azul. My wife and I lived in an apartment building that we later found out had 15 people buried there during the Lebanese Civil War. We didn't know at the time. The apartment was in a building that's 2 stories, which used to be a villa for a rich person before being converted to multiple units. Long story short, there was a door to the building that was a huge metal rusted piece of shit and made the most god-awful sound when it opened or closed, even if only slightly. You can't miss it. We were up at night way past midnight and we heard 3 rough, loud knocks. The door of the building made no sound. I went and opened the door. My wife didn't want me to. And nothing. I ran out to see if someone was messing with us. Checked the 2 floors, and still nothing. I had a really bad feeling and went back inside, told my wife to check the windows. We could see anyone coming out of the building through the windows, and I checked the balcony to see if anyone was around. Still nothing. Then, 2 days later, I saw her. She was right next to my side of the bed. An old, tall, ugly woman with half her face decayed. She had long black hair streaked with white. I used to have bad dreams and assumed this was just another one, so I closed my eyes and braced my body. I opened them like 3 seconds later and she was gone. I was startled and thought, this is a dream, and moved on with my life. I was scared shitless, not gonna lie, and did some research. There was a myth of the crone that comes to people's bed at night. I thought I was just hallucinating until a few days later. My wife, a blonde, called me into the bathroom. There was a long, thick black strand of hair in the bathroom. I didn't consider it a big deal until she took me to the kitchen. Inside the cabinets, she showed me the same black hair, and one was white. Now I don't know what the fuck that was, but we moved out soon after because the building was to be demolished. They found all those bodies down there, and I still wonder today. One of my uncles lived in the apartment before us. We asked his wife about it, and she got very serious. She said that when her son was a kid, she was brushing his hair in the same room we used to sleep in, and he looked at the mirror and screamed, telling her, "Mommy, Mommy, who is that?" She couldn't see anything, but asked him what he saw, and he said, "The woman with the long black and white hair looking at me from inside." This story sounds ridiculous, but I have no reason to lie. I saw her. We saw her. I think she knocked on the door and came in that night. Our next story is entitled The Farm and was written by Els Bells. In my early 20s, I worked on a farm for 2 years in rural England. I was straight out of university and keen for a roof over my head and a purpose in life. I was treated like family and did all the normal chores. I cared for the horses mostly, as they were my main focus of interest, but I got to know the dairyman, we'll call him Mike, and I soon had responsibility for the whole dairy goat herd. Within a few weeks, I was inducted into how to use the electronic milking machine and what to look out for, as well as showing me the ropes and helping me to get to know the girls. Goats are sweet, darling creatures. He told me some more about the history of the site. The owners had taken over the site in 2000 from another family member who had done nothing with it. He was a little odd, and a few oddities were found around the place. For example, he buried a Land Rover rather than sending it away for scrap, and they found the fully preserved complete skeleton of a large dog in a shed completely encased by thorns. They always wondered if he'd left the animal to starve to death. The owners had leveled everything that was there and built 2 huge barns, all the animal housing, the milking parlor, and the dairy, as well as their own house and the stockman's cottage. It was amazing. They had built it all themselves with their own hands. Construction was long, and during the process something happened that stayed with them and stayed on the land. Mike told me the story of the building of the dairy and milking parlor. When building, foundations are key, especially on land near the sea with a high percentage of sand and clay in the soil, which can cause flooding. The foundations were dug deep and filled with what we call hardcore. Hardcore is stone, rock, and brick, pieces of old demolished buildings, or pieces of mountains. When some was ordered, one of the owners, we'll call him Steve, had some problems. After 2 days of waiting and it never arriving, he called again and was promised some from London from a place they were demolishing. Sure enough, it arrived and building began. He and his dog, a faithful black lab, would sit together building and sorting, using the JCB digger when necessary. During the digging and sifting of the hard core, things were found. Whatever building this was from was old. Very old. Pre-Victorian old. Huge pieces of window frames that looked like they had come from a Gothic church, pieces of what might have been a statue. Then they found the bones. Steve had no idea where they had come from, but with the dog with him, he assumed they had come from the ground and that the dog had found them. They were long and burned at one end. Steve sat them in the kitchen as something interesting to show his wife. We'll call her Elizabeth. The bones stayed in the kitchen for some time, and Elizabeth's father, at this time a lecturer at Cambridge University 50 miles away, came by. He was a man of science, but also a preacher. He was, however, rational. When he saw the bones, he asked Steve where they came from. Steve told him that he thought they were likely sheep bones or similar, and they had been found lying around. Elizabeth's father's face was white. "Steve, that's a human femur." Steve stayed calm. Sure, Elizabeth's uncle was odd, but he wasn't a killer. If they hadn't come from the soil, there was only one other place it had come from. He made a call to the company that had supplied the hardcore. Keeping calm, he told them he had found some interesting artifacts and asked where his had come from for curiosity's sake. As the company had demolished the place themselves, they were able to say, "You must mean the crematorium. Yes, we've had a few calls about pieces people have found." The farm is a quiet place, and while there is a main road not far away, the most prominent sound is the various animals and the wildlife, birds, and at night, owls. It's not what you'd call a creepy place, but the bones hadn't been in the kitchen long before small things happened. Stuff would be moved. The usual thing you'd put down to absent-mindedness. The movement detector light in the hallway would come on for no reason. Once it was known what they were and where they had come from, it was clear that the bone should go with other pieces from the crematorium, and within days it was buried under the parlor with dignity. Elizabeth's father did a service. It wasn't long before things went missing in the parlor and would seem to have been moved. When feeding goat kids, bottles would go missing after washing and reappear in strange places. But it was nothing compared to the gentleman. Steve said he first appeared in the winter after construction when the room is coldest. With no heating and no insulation, it easily drops well below freezing. He would stand and watch, just in his field of vision. Always the same spot in the corner of the parlor. Silent, respectful, about 6'2", including the top hat. A complete human shadow, only shadows aren't solid. That's not Mike's description, nor is it Steve's. It's mine. He has been seen by us all. The gentleman wasn't alone, though. In fact, by our reckoning, there were three. The gentleman, the boy, I nicknamed him William or Billy to make it all feel more normal, and the trickster. Boy was very different. He would commonly be mistaken for Elizabeth's and Steve's son, who at this point was an only child, age 3. I have seen balls come bouncing from nowhere and goat kid bottles snatched from people's hands, but I've seen Steve and Elizabeth's son in fits of giggles laughing at some unseen joke. It certainly wasn't sinister. Like the gentleman, he was quiet enough and caused little trouble, but you knew he was there. It was the trickster who unnerved me, and he was rarely seen, but you knew when you did. He was about 5'9", had short hair, and was scruffier than the gentleman. He was also less respectful. Steve, Elizabeth, Mike, and I would talk about the visitors in the dairy, like they were part of the routine, but none of them had the experience I did on Valentine's Day 2009. When there was activity, Steve would see it in morning milking, and I would see it at evening milking. At dinner, we would swap stories and always find similarities, but not this time. It was dark when I set up the parlor at 5 p.m. and began milking. The only light from that side of the farm is from the dairy, the parlor, and the barn. Otherwise, it is pitch black. The machine is loud, and as usual, I had headphones in. The goats are brought into the parlor and loaded into the gates ready for milking. Within minutes, I knew he was there. I pulled out the headphones. He was standing just on the edge of my peripheral vision and kept moving slowly towards me. I knew it was the trickster. I turned around, and as I did, he moved away. I turned back to milking, and he crept back. I shouted, "I can see you," and he darted away. This happened a number of times. Having made it clear I wanted to be left alone, I kept working, trying to finish as quickly as possible so the goats didn't get cold standing around. That's when I heard the crash come from the barn. The gate behind the parlor had been pushed over, and I saw a small black figure scurry away. Livid that the dog had got into the feed store, I screamed her name, and she came padding along behind me from the dairy where she had been sat waiting to be given some milk. He wasn't leaving me alone. I told him again, "For goodness sake, stop this and leave me alone." At the end of milking, I filled the sinks with water to wash down, adding chemicals and checking the milk tank. As I did, he returned. I had had enough. I was exhausted. I was cold. I wanted to finish milking and spend the night with my beloved, who would be picking me up in a few hours. It was cold, -2 degrees Celsius outside. It was dark. He wasn't leaving me alone and kept getting in my space. In a fit of pure annoyance, I shouted the most hurtful thing I could think of, especially to a ghost. "I'm sick and tired of this. Go away and get a fucking life." The reaction was immediate. I had never seen them move things until then. To be honest, I wasn't certain they could. He ran at the door out of the parlor and into the dairy room, threw it open, ran to the sinks, turned both off, opened the sliding door, slammed it behind him, and was gone. I just stood there in silence staring at the door. As with many encounters with the visitors, I could never be sure that it was real. Was it a shared delusion? The water in the sink was still, taps firmly off. I had seen the door shake as he slammed it, felt it vibrate from the force of the slam. In the silence, Steve walked in from the other end of the dairy. He was here, I said, and he wouldn't leave me alone. I know. He was around all morning. The visitors are gone now, and we no longer see them in the dead of winter. While in some ways I missed them, I do think my feckericism, as we called it, was for the best. I don't know what they were, but a mystic came around the farm a few months earlier. As she left, she looked up at the goat barn and said to Steve, "There are 3 of them, aren't there? A man and 2 very naughty boys, but they mean you no harm. Lady, you don't know the half of it." I moved off the land a year later, but still visit and farm sit. Since the Valentine's Day happenings, things have quieted down, but they haven't completely stopped. I've had my name whispered in my ear. Twice. 6 months apart. In the kitchen. In the same spot. Where the bones used to be. In an empty house. On my own. Someone knows I still visit and wants me to know he's still here.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Our last story is entitled Glowing Eyes and was written by Notoriously Geeky. I am a lifelong since-birth New Orleans native. I still live here. With that being said, I've seen a lot of strange people. I worked a couple years as a bartender on Bourbon Street and would meet all kinds of characters. Some scary, some not. Well, I'd say about 15 years ago now, I was dating a guy who played saxophone in a brass band on Frenchman Street. If you don't know, it's like Bourbon, but more live music, less obnoxious drunk assholes, and more locals hanging out there. Anyways, after leaving one of his gigs together, we started to walk back to his car, which was parked probably 6 blocks away. French Quarter parking is horrible. As we are walking and talking about nothing in particular, we noticed an older white man behind us. He wasn't dressed weird or strange. If anything, he had on a really nice suit and jacket. First thing I noticed was he had a really nice voice and a very, I don't know the right way to explain it, but intriguing presence about him. He walked up to my side and said good evening. We replied the same, and he asked if we were locals, and we confirmed his suspicion. As he was speaking, I looked into his eyes and realized they were gold. Not like hazel or golden brown, straight up gold and almost shimmering and glowing. We continued on our way, chatting about the weather, the city, etc., and parted ways about 3 blocks up. As we have a few blocks left to go, I happened to look at a license plate of a parked car. It said 666 in the numbers, and I didn't think much of it. The next car's license plate said saved. Okay, weird considering the last car, but okay, I still didn't mention it to my ex. Then finally, we made it to our car, and I swear I'm being completely honest here. It said 666 in the numbers again. So I finally said something to my ex, and he cut me off and said, "We have passed some weird license plates tonight, and that guy was freaking me out. Did you see his eyes? They looked like fire burning." I told him I noticed too, and I wondered out loud who the man was, and even joked about it being the devil. I shit you not, the same guy comes up the street on the opposite side, and we can see the glowing eyes from where we are standing. He sees us and waves, and shouts a little across the street saying, "Funny we were all meant to be in the same spot at the same time." His smile was almost too wide. We laughed, waved, and got in the car, and I don't think I've ever burned rubber, but I know I did that night. I don't know what he was or who he was, but I've never forgotten his presence, his smile, or those damn glowing eyes. Guess that's just New Orleans for you. What did you think of these creepy stories? Comment or email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. And as a reminder, be sure to follow Chillers and Thrillers wherever you stream podcasts. A huge thank you to M for sending these stories. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with these lingering questions. What scary experiences do you have? And would you consider them to be natural or supernatural? Normal or paranormal? I've shared the stories. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.